House will come to order. This morning, the pledge will be said by Cesar Murillo from Florida Pitt Waller School in Denver, Colorado, guest of Representative Benavidez.
Please say the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Gregorio, please call the roll.
Representatives Arndt. Representative Arndt. Representative Baisley. Representative Beckman. Benavidez. Byrd. Bockenfeld. Representative Bockenfeld is excused. Buck. Buckner. Buenteo. Caraveo. Carver. Catlin.
Excused.
Coleman.
Sir.
Cutter.
That's the right way to do it.
Representative Cutter. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Gregorio, hold on just a minute. Members, Mr. Randall isn't here today, so can you help Mr. Gregorio? Oh, you guys switched. I just thought you were. Regardless, the point is, can you please help by shouting out where you are so he can find you for roll call? Okay? So let folks know where you are. Thank you.
Duran.
She's excused.
Representative Escar is excused. Exum. Froelich. Garnett. Geithner. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray.
I'm right here.
Hanson.
Yeah, that guy. That's him.
Herod.
There she is.
Yep, there we go.
Holtorf.
There we go. Got one.
Putin.
There's Edie. She's
Humphrey.
Oh, yeah.
absent.
Jackson.
Right there.
Okay.
Jaquez Lewis.
Whoa, there's a hand.
Yeah, there she is.
Kennedy.
Right there.
Quite the beard. Quite the beard.
Kip.
On that one. I guess
Kraft Tharp.
there's Tracy. She's back.
Back there, right there.
Landgraf. Larson.
He's the guy that looks like he's 20.
Liston.
He's been here for
Montine.
He's just
Hot dog.
McCluskey. McKean.
Here! Good, there he is.
McLaughlin.
Oh,
Melton.
he's in the back.
Don't confuse
Michael
Melton.
St-Genet.
Melton and Pelton are different.
There we go.
Mullica.
Confuse Melton and Pelton.
Neville.
He's
Pelton.
Pelton's different than
Ransom.
Makes sense.
Pelton.
Rich.
Rich right there.
Roberts.
Just strike him. Yeah, he's out. He's expelled.
Sane.
Okay. Yeah, no. She's. We declare a vacancy. Sane is out. Oh, she's here. Okay.
Excused or here?
I don't know.
Representative
Might
Sane.
actually be.
Excused.
Yeah, she's excused.
Sandridge.
There we go.
Singer.
Sandwich.
Sirota.
Whoa, there she is. Quiet voice.
Snyder.
I know.
Soper.
Soper.
Oh, yeah.
Soper.
Sullivan.
Monsieur Soper.
Coleman in the back.
Tipper.
Behind.
Tatone.
Way back to you, Tepper.
We're almost there.
Valdez-A.
We've almost made it.
There we go.
Valdez D.
Got it.
There's
Van Winkle. Weissman.
Couldn't even see him. He's hiding.
Oh, there we go.
Will.
Excused.
He's right there.
Did you find him?
He's right there.
Oh,
Williams.
Perry.
There we go.
Wilson.
Jim Wilson.
Young. Madam Speaker.
how many? Jared, how many?
Oh, sorry. 60.
With 60 members present, 5 excused, we have a quorum. Representative Young.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Journal of Monday, January 13th, 2020, be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No!
The motion passes. Announcements and introductions. Any announcements? Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There was a comment, and this is an announcement, by the way. I'm announcing that I'm opening up my offices starting on Friday at 2 o'clock for the 38 protesters that came to the Capitol, as well as the sergeants and the State Patrol and the Denver Police Department, or anybody else who wishes to come and discuss what happened. Because after I heard that our institution was besmirched by civil disobedience, I felt that the 38 protesters needed a voice too. Civil disobedience has its role in a democracy. And when it was said from the well that this institution is greater than any one of us, I totally agree. But also at the same time, we remember that there's something greater than this institution, and that is the people. That is the people that produce the legislators that create this institution. There is nothing greater than the people, including this institution, because without them, we don't have an institution. The role of civil disobedience started with Gandhi and the salt marches. Like to think that actually my friends on the other side of the aisle would look at this anti-taxation effort that was undertook by the Indian people and look at the role and say that their institution was not besmirched by those salt marches. And the reason that I'm opening these office hours is I'm reminded of the civil disobedience of our own veterans in the 1930s. Under Herbert Hoover, who came to the White House steps, who came to the Capitol to ask for their war bonus during the Great Depression, and were not only turned away, but General Patton and General MacArthur met them with bayonets and bullets and tear gas. Just a year later, they came to that same seat of power under a different president, and that president set up camps for them to be in, arranged transportation for them to come to the Capitol. And instead of sending General MacArthur, he sent Eleanor Roosevelt. And they talked. And they didn't get their war bonus. But the protests didn't continue because they were offered entry into the Civilian Conservation Corps, even though they were too old to participate in it. They were offered transportation back to their homes if they wanted to leave the camps. They were offered an ear. And so I, in that spirit of Gandhi, in the spirit of Roosevelt, in the spirit of the countertops at Woolworths, want to provide that ear for the people who didn't present any physical danger to this building, with the possible exception, I saw some leaflets and there may have been some paper cuts. But at the end of the day, it's our sergeants who are trying to uphold this institution and follow the rules. But when you see kids and 18-year-olds charged and put into jail for over 24 hours with no idea what they're being charged with, when you see them assembled on the West Steps waiting to be carried away, not resisting arrest, being put into cars where there weren't even enough seat belts, when you see that happen, I don't think the punishment fits the crime today. And by the way, for those 38 protesters, I've been on the phone. Charges have not yet been filed. What you received was what is in the arrest report. So those charges have not been filed. So when people are asking to drop the charges, let's remember that the charges have not yet been filed. But if those charges stick, I don't think 2 years and $7,500, that's not a punishment fitting the crime. If we see those charges filed, our First Amendment and our role of civil disobedience in this building, outside this building, will forever be chilled. I agree, and I participated in civil disobedience. I understand that when I sit at the GEO facility in their parking lot and block traffic, that I may get arrested. I understand that there is a role for civil disobedience, and I will not get let off the hook. But I also understand that the punishments must fit the crime, and when the First Amendment, the thing that got all of us here, is under attack, we need to be able to make sure that we are lending our ear to the folks that talked about what's happening at Bella Romero, what's happening in Commerce City, what's happening even in my own district where we found unsafe levels of benzene next to a school. Those voices need to be heard, and we need to be having a thoughtful conversation about how they're heard. But ultimately, this is my ask of all of us, is that we open up all of our offices at different times to not only listen to the protesters, but to listen to what our sergeants are saying, to what our Denver police is saying, because we need to figure out a better way to allow for civil disobedience to occur and make sure that people aren't thrown into jail for 30 hours. So with that, I look forward to pursuing this conversation even further. But my office is open starting Friday at 2 p.m. We'll do it again on Monday. We'll do it again the next Friday until everyone feels like they've had their voice heard. And it is my hope that our Denver District Attorney uses her best discretion to understand that these adults and children don't deserve to have a permanent mark on their record that could include 2 years in jail. That's chilling. And I'll close on this. When you're arrested, it's not like you march into a building and you march out. You're disrobed, you're viewed by other folks. This is about making sure that people feel safe in this building and feel safe out of this building, exercising their First Amendment rights. And ultimately, having that conversation about what the role of civil disobedience is in this building so we can make sure that our meetings happen, that everyone gets a fair hearing, and that ultimately we uphold not only this institution, but the people who create this institution. Thank you for your indulgence. I hope you join me at my meetings, and I hope we can have this conversation because I ultimately respect each and every one of you and want to make sure that all voices are heard. Thank you.
Representative McKean.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And actually, Representative Singer, I appreciate your words. I take the history of civil disobedience back just a little bit further. If you haven't, you ought to read George Washington's letter to the Quakers, who refused to fight in the Revolution and said, it's against our moral principles. We can't do this. And Washington wrote them a letter that was actually, even today, very profound. And he said, I understand your concern about this. I understand your desire to live out your ethic and your morals. But if there comes a time and we need you to fight and you don't, we will ask you to leave. And if you think about the history of this country and you think about the power of the Quakers on the east coast of this country and the formation of this republic, you will know how hard that letter was to write for General Washington at the time. Civil disobedience has its place. And as a Quaker, growing up a Quaker, going to Quaker schools, being inculcated with that ethic, that you do stand up and you do stand for something bigger than yourself. And I think that's what we all expect out of civil disobedience. I also think that you pick those times and places where your voice has the most effect. And then you accept the consequence if that is a place where it shouldn't be. And what I would say is the decorum of this institution is very important. that we do actually have those opportunities for people to be heard. And to your word, I appreciate the fact that we can have kind of a mini debate on this issue, because here's the thing, we do offer those opportunities. We offer those opportunities in our hearings, in our hallways. We are all accessible. I don't have to ask for office hours because the door to my office is always open. It is open to every single person who walks in there who either agrees with what I believe or doesn't agree with what I believe. And the delight to me is when I get to have that moment of a real, honest, open conversation with someone who says, no, I don't agree with your position on this. When we have that moment in this chamber and it interrupts what we are trying to do, and when it interrupts our normal course of business, we can look at that as, okay, that's terrific, because what we have now is sort of a voice from the balcony that says, hey, you ought to think about this. If that were the only opportunity for that person to have their voice heard, I would buy everything you're selling. But it's not. And when I talk about what this institution means, if we have no standard and we say, hey, come on down, holler from the balcony, whatever you want to do, then it's an anything goes world. And I think we all are in opposition to an anything goes world where we're fighting against each other, talking at each other instead of to each other. That is what I would ask you, is that when you have those voices of opposition, that you stop what you're doing, that you sit down and you engage. Because that, I would hope, would be the result of civil disobedience, is that you get our attention in a way that makes us stop and say, all right, let me hear what you're thinking. So Representative Singer, thank you for your words. And thank you to this body, because I think this is kind of an important morning for all of us.
Minority Leader Neville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I want to make an announcement. If you weren't aware, Colorado has a thing called the gavel amendment. And so the announcement here is we have a gavel amendment that allows for every bill that's heard that gets a public hearing. That's where a great place for voices of opposition to bills and ideas and policies in this building can be heard. So thank you, Colorado citizens. It was years before we were all here, but we passed that gavel amendment. They have an ability to do it, and they should do it in that manner in the right way.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just want to take this opportunity to underscore what Representative McKean has said as well. I think this is an important issue that we don't often have the courage to talk about, as I'm sure all of you have done as well. I spent a lot of time talking to my constituents back in my district this summer, and there is an alarming lack of civil discourse going on in my district, as I'm sure it is with yours. And it is things like what happened at the State of the Union, where that is not a productive conversation. That was an attempt to read a manifesto. It is not an invitation for debate. It is not an elevation of public discourse. It is a continuation of a conflict culture whereby, political points are scored by screaming louder than the other person. And I would be very reluctant to encourage that kind of behavior. I invite people to come in and talk on any issue. As Representative McKean has said, please come into our office hours, come and talk to us in a civil way, come and show up in committee and speak on those issues, but do not assault the governor of this state from the balcony. Do not assault your elected representatives on the street. Do not assault your neighbors because they are of a different political persuasion of you. We need to elevate and get back to a time when neighbors can talk to neighbors about political differences, not in a shouting way, not in a political stunt, but in a real productive manner. And I encourage you all to take that to heart, because I think we are seeing serious divisions in our society that we're papering over here, and it will really poison the ability of this body to do its work, and it will poison the ability of this state to govern itself. So please do seriously consider that as you go forward. And when you are engaging with people who call themselves activists, that is a noble title and there's a noble cause to that, but there's also an insidious, attempt to stifle speech that is often masked in the title of activism. And I just encourage us all to be critical about that. and to challenge people and to not just back down and say, oh, well, you're an activist, so that's a noble cause, and what you're saying must be, must be listened to. It must be, but it needs to be done in a proper venue, and it needs to be done in a way that respects civil society and respects people who have differing opinions. So please do take that to heart.
Members, we're going to continue this conversation. I just want to make sure that folks in the well who wants to talk on this or something else. Representative Wilson, are you talking about this subject? Okay, so Representative Wilson, then Melton, then Benavidez. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It wasn't why I came to the well, but that's, and we can beat this horse pretty severely, but it's still not going to go anywhere. The bottom line here, and I was just telling Representative Singer, the key to what he said, he participated in civil disobedience, and he was willing, what he said was willing to pay the price, and then clarified he was willing to pay a price. Folks, throughout the history of this nation, everyone who committed any act of civil disobedience was willing to pay the price. So if the price is X, and that is what is exacted in this situation, you have to be willing to pay the price. You can't do the act of civil disobedience and then say, oh, I'm being mistreated. No. If that's the price, you have to be willing to pay it. I am all for the freedom of speech. I am not for freedom of disruption. If you want to use vulgar language in my presence and my family is there, your right to freedom of speech ended when my children start hearing that. And I will protect my freedom. I will protect the right of people to demonstrate in this chamber, wherever, but they also have to pay the price. Because there's one option and there's another option. Option A is they are right. Option B is they are wrong, and that won't be decided by what takes place in this chamber. But I have been an advocate long before the protesters showed up that we do not respect this chamber as we should. And I have said it many times during my years here. We get so full of ourselves that we feel like this chamber is here for us. It is not. The desks at which we sit have been here since this Capitol was built. And I watched a member of this body desecrate these by putting their feet up on it and leaning back in a chair. This is an important institution. We are a part of history. And I totally agree with being able to stand and wherever Representative Singer went, there he is. I will stand beside him and protect his right to exercise this civil disobedience in any way he wants to, and his right to freedom of speech. But it's just like when I drive up here each week. I suppose civil disobedience is exceeding the speed limit. I do that, I confess. If I am stopped, I don't think I can complain about being fined because I exceeded the speed limit. The two don't match. I knew what I was doing when I exceeded the speed limit. Folks, this chamber is amazing. And if it takes someone up here that has to demonstrate because they don't feel like they are heard, then we are not doing our jobs. I was shocked to hear that we're going to set up hours so people can come to our office. Most of you know where my office is. That door is not closed very often. And I've not talked to one of those folks. And probably I'd be a good one to talk to, because I do listen, and that's part of freedom of speech, is listening. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I'm a little troubled and maybe a little, irked by some of the things I'm hearing in the well here today. And I want to caution this body on how we lecture change. This week we will be recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King on Friday in a resolution. And when we were going through the civil rights movement and the bus boycotts and the boycotts and the sit-ins at lunch counters, No one said, well, there's a time and a place to do this. We did what needed to be done when it needed to be done. And so when I'm hearing that there's a decorum or that there's a time or place or we have a gavel amendment or you can make your voice heard in other ways, understand that it is not our job to dictate or lecture change. When change comes, change comes. And so all I want to do is just, again, caution this body when we say things like that. I'm a little upset by hearing that come from us as representatives, as voices of the people. If we're not being a true voice of the people, it's the people's choice, it's their duty to speak up and to call us out. So members, again, as we start this legislative session, as we go into the other activities that'll happen this week, just keep that in the back of your mind. Yes, there may be a price for civil disobedience, but it's not our place to say whether or not you should pay that price or when that should happen. Thank you.
Representative Benavidez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I wasn't going to come down here because I agreed completely with Representative Singer's comments, and I want to thank him for bringing those comments forward. You know, civil disobedience is about allowing people a right to exercise their First Amendment. And we talk about this being our chambers and being the state capitol. It's also the people's house. And this country was built on a history that allows people the right to have their say. Think about the Boston Tea Party, which was one of the ways people were able to go in and do that. I don't know if there were repercussions to the individuals who did that, and I am not opposed to there being repercussions to civil disobedience. But I think what Representative Singer was saying is that the repercussions so far have been up to 30 hours in jail, not being charged. So what is the crime we're talking about? People came into our house, the people's house, and they unfurled banners and they screamed. And what they were screaming about was what Representative Singer mentioned. He mentioned the Bella Romero School, where children are having releases of benzene next to their schools, within 500 feet of their schools. That's a toxic chemical that can cause cancer in these children. And as a state, we were not prepared for that release. We had trucks and monitors sent out there the next week. That is not enough for our children. And if we're not hearing that, for people to come and make sure we hear it is something that is important. It's what we have to hear. December 11th, there was another release of chemicals from the Suncor refinery in Commerce City. We had to close 2 schools because people did not know what was in those chemicals. It was at legislators' insistence that CDPHE go and get those ashes from those chemicals released tested. That wasn't done automatically. They still don't have the results of that test. We don't know what's happening out there. And if we don't know those are very real consequences to people, we need to hear it. And if that's one way for us to hear it, let's hear it. And those people, yes, they interrupted our nice event, but they did not hurt anybody, and they should have been escorted out of this building, and they were. But it's telling that they've not been charged with anything, because what is the crime? I don't know what they'll be charged with criminally, if at all, and that's what we're talking about. Look at what happened in Wisconsin when teachers, when union members went to that building. Do they not have the right to do that? Again, this is not just where we work. It is the people's house. And I support them coming in, but we have methods where we can let people talk. We have them testify in committee. We have ways for them to do that, and people do that. But, you know, the frustration is so high amongst our constituents, amongst the public. I don't think it hurt anyone for what happened. It brought those issues to our attention. And, you know, as my colleague from Fremont County said, there has to be a price to be paid. And the price is removal from the chambers in this case. I don't know that there was any criminal violation. And when they overreact on our behalf, I think it's important that Representative Singers and the rest of us make a statement and say that as well. You know, I have represented and led a team that represented over 240 people that committed civil disobedience. All of those were acquitted because those are not easy cases. It's not easy to say what's going on in this case, and that's why I'm sure the law enforcement authorities are stuck right now. So we need to look at these things, how they come to us, and understand if the State Patrol and other law enforcement are acting on our behalf, they do it in a way that honors all of the traditions of this building, of our work. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this topic? All right, other announcements and introductions. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's a bit of a tough act to follow. I'll just say briefly, I appreciate the comments from my colleagues in Longmont, Aurora, and Adams County, but I did need to make a more quotidian kind of announcement for judiciary members in particular. At 10:10, to give the Senate time to conclude some business that it's doing, we will begin day 2 of our Joint Judiciary Committee Smart Act hearings over in the old Supreme Court chamber. We are hearing today from Alternate Defense Counsel, Office of the Public Defender, Office of Public Guardianship, the Parole Board, and DOC. You should all have materials on that by email from nonpartisan staff. Again, 10:10 upon adjournment of both chambers. The other thing I want to call everyone's attention to is a new meeting that is set for Joint Judiciary with the Joint Budget Committee this coming Friday, the 17th, 12 noon. It'll be in the Old State Library, aka 271. This is a meeting set up specifically at the request of the Joint Budget Committee to involve all members of both House and Senate Judiciary Committees in the conversation about the pending shutdown of CMRC and what that is going to mean for prison population management, 1920 supplementals, 2021 appropriations, and other legislation. Again, our input has specifically been requested by members of the JBC. They want to hear from everybody, so please make every attempt to be there Friday, 12 noon. Thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On a lighter note, I told Carrie Canterbury and her daughter Kaylin over here on my right, Carrie works for the Daily Record in Canyon City, that we're not doing much, and you won't hear much on the House floor, but we certainly want to welcome you to the House floor. She probably should have been sitting over here at the press table this morning during that discussion, but I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that they were here. Also, Thursday is Sportsman's Caucus, and we will be down on the first floor, and we'll have the famous hot dogs and so forth. And again, the 2 topics that we're discussing will be the Colorado Wildlife Council's new education campaign, and the second topic will be Coloradoans Protecting Wildlife. Will be on hand to talk about the restoration of gray wolves. So just a minor thing that's come up in the news lately. So we'll be talking about that, and we will be having the hot dogs. And also the National Western, as you know, is going on, and we are raising funds for that. So if you want to become a member of the Cowgirl Cowboy Caucus, please let Representative Art or myself know, and we'll tell you how to do that. And we'll purchase a steer on behalf of one of the young people in 4-H in Colorado. Thank you.
Members, while you all are still quiet, I'm just going to take this opportunity to read House Rule 22, which is the personal privilege. And basically it says if you have a matter of personal privilege, it's appropriate to speak for no longer than 5 minutes upon such matters as may collectively affect the House, its rights, its dignity, and the integrity of its proceedings, or the rights, reputation, and conduct of its members. It is not appropriate in those instances to get into the merits of any policy, bill, resolution, memorial, or other business pending before the House. So just as a heads up for future reference, discussing the proceedings of this House during announcements and introductions as a moment of personal privilege is appropriate, but I will gavel folks down if you start getting into the merits of a particular policy, whatever it may be. So just a warning and a heads up on that in the future. Okay, I think Representative Carver was next, then Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, just want to remind you that this evening from 5 to 7, the Colorado criminal justice leaders are having a reception to kick off the legislative session. Those sponsors are the Fraternal Order of Police, the Colorado State Patrol, COVA, which is Colorado Organization for Victims Assistance, the police chiefs, the DAs, and the county sheriffs. That will be held at the Hacienda, Colorado, 16th Street Mall. Light hors d'oeuvres, again, that is 5 to 7. Thank you.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the reminder on that. Well, speaking of privileges, it's my privilege to announce that there are area agencies on aging. I distributed a document for all of you here today. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with your AAAs, I will be working with the Colorado Senior Lobby once a month to be giving out information on what is happening in your districts. If you have not contacted your AAA yet, you should. And when you get issues that are dealing constituent issues, we've got 14 different area agencies on aging. They're all listed on a handout that I provided for you. You should have a point of contact there. And we'll be going on throughout the year just to tell you a little bit about what our AAAs do and what you can do for your constituents. And I look forward to having that conversation with you and the Colorado Senior Lobby.
Any other announcements or introductions? Representative Lundeen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a quick reminder to the members of the Health and Insurance Committee, we do not have a committee hearing today or tomorrow afternoon either. Our first official committee hearing will be next Wednesday, the 22nd, and I do believe we have a joint hearing on Tuesday. So look forward to seeing y'all then and enjoy what little reprieve we have. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stay in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will be in recess till later today.